Hello everyone, welcome to Skills Build Training YouTube channel. Myself Mohammad Zubair and this channel is all about showing you how to become a highly paid IT pro really fast. So the topic of today's video is what is DNS, how DNS works and why DNS is important for the internet. So without any further ado, let's get started. If we talk in the most straightforward language, DNS is a massive network of servers located worldwide, and they contain distributed databases. In those databases, we have the information of domain names and IP addresses. We also call these addresses book of the internet. Suppose I write a website URL google.com into my browser. The DNS will find the IP address matching the URL I have entered into my browser. Upon matching the IP address and URL, we will get the exact result as Google will open into our browser. Now let's see what is DNS. Whenever we want to send something to someone or see anybody, we need to know the address of that person or the destination. Without having the address, it is impossible to reach any place, no matter how many resources we possess. The same phenomena works for the internet. Whenever we want to access a particular web page or a website, we need its address. In terms of the internet, we call that address the IP address. For example, if you wanted to open a Facebook page, you need to have the IP addresses of it. And we used to enter the IP address in our browser and it used to take us to its page. At the start of the internet or at the advent of the internet, we needed to remember the IP addresses, and those IP addresses were used to be in long numbers, and they are still in numbers. For example, the IP address of Facebook is 31.13.71.1. So if you enter this number into any of your browser, it will take you to the home page of Facebook. But this is not a way for today. As we have billions of web pages and millions of websites, and obviously every page and website has a unique IP address. Just like Facebook has 31.13.71.1, so it is impossible and it is beyond the human capacity to remember the IP addresses for all those web pages and websites. So it means we needed a solution to eliminate that impossible problem. So in 1980, a man named Paul Mokapetris introduced a solution that automatically mapped the IP addresses to their domain names. And that was it. DNS was born. This phenomena or this system is also believed to be the backbone of the modern day internet. Now, the question comes into mind that what is the domain name itself? Well, as I have told you, the IP address of Facebook is 31.13.71.1. The domain name of this IP address is facebook.com. Just like Facebook, Google has an IP address, and the domain name of that IP address will be google.com. Now let's see how does DNS works. As the IP addresses are mapped on the domain names, but where does this information get stored? The answer is name servers. Name servers stores the DNS record, and a DNS record is like a file that has the information about which domain name maps to which IP address. To be very clear, we do not have all those records of DNS or all the DNS files at one single name server. That is not possible. Even if it is possible, that would be a ridiculous thing to do. They are distributed all over the world, and we call these name servers the root name servers. Instead of storing all the domains of the world, we store the location of TLD in it. TLD is also known as top level domain. Now, You might be wondering what TLD is. It is a straightforward phenomena. You might have noticed that every website address ends with some specific words, like some ends with .com, some ends with .edu, or even with a country like UK, US, PK, or IN. These words are known as TLDs. All those TLDs, which I have told you earlier, have their name servers. So we get to divide all the domains in the world into different categories based on their TLD. And it is better approach as well to handle billions of IP addresses and domain names. Now, let's see how it works. Let's say you wanted to search for a particular domain name. By domain name here, we mean a website or a web page. Your browser will not contact the root name server, which sits at the top. Instead, the browser will ask your local name server if it has the cached information you are looking for. The local name server usually is your internet service provider. So let's suppose you are looking for some popular website like Google, YouTube, or Facebook. In that case, there are chances that your local name server will have the record for that particular domain name. And if that is the case, your browser does not need to look any further up in the hierarchy. What if the domain name we are looking for is not cached? In that case, the local name servers will contact the root name server for the information, and that will guide it. And that's it. So some steps take place when you enter the domain's name and get result, and I will explain them one by one. In the first step, you enter any domain name like example.com into any of your browser, and the query travels into the internet and gets to the DNS recursive resolver. The recursive resolver is the local name server, your internet service provider. In the next step, the recursive resolver contacts the DNS root name server at the highest level. In the next step, the root server responds with the address of a top-level domain's DNS server like .com or .edu, etc. And that TLD has the information about its domain. For example, as you just searched for example.com, request will be pointed towards the .com TLD. Now, as the resolver has the TLD information, it will contact the .com TLD. In the next step, the TLD server will respond with the IP address of your domain's name server, which was example.com. By now, we have the IP address and the TLD information so that the resolver will send a query to the domain's name server. The next step will return the IP address of example.com to the name server. Now, the DNS resolver will respond to your web browser with the IP address of the domains which you requested at the first step. Then the browser will make an HTTP or HTTPS request to that IP address. At last, the server with that IP address will return the web page to be shown on your web browser. So we are transparent with what DNS is and how it works. Now let's move on to the last part of today's video, and that is why DNS is important for the internet. As DNS is modern day internet's backbone, it means if DNS stops working and stops responding, we will not be able to connect and communicate with any website or web page on the internet. This is all because whenever we try to visit a particular website or a web page, we do not have to go through the stress or any burden of remembering and entering the lengthy IP addresses number. Just like Facebook have the IP address as 31.13.71.1, so what if you were asked to remember the IP addresses of like 20 or 30 websites? It will get complicated. DNS takes this pain of ours and figures this problem out on its own. So we just need to enter a domain name and we end up with precisely what we are looking for. So if DNS cannot translate a domain name to its correct IP address, we will not be able to access any website or web page. In simple words, the majority of the internet will break down. In the end, I would like to talk about one thing, and that is DNS is a compassionate thing. DNS is the first step to connecting to the internet. And so it is for the cyber criminals to attack with malwares, ransomware, phishing attack, etc. So if we get to block this connection for cyber criminals, it won't be effortless for them to go any further. As per the estimations, phishing attacks accounted for almost $26 billion lost globally between 2016 and 2019. Ransomware attacks got increased up to 40% in 2019. So it is imperative to have DNS protection for the internet to be safe place for the people. And with that, we are done with today's video. Leave a like, subscribe and press the bell icon. We will see you in the next video. Till then, take care.